What does it take to ensure that every Detroiter has access to a fair wage and equal opportunity? Detroit Future City convened a panel of experts for their 5th annual Equity Forum at Wayne County Community College, tackling the critical issues of economic equity in the city. I'm Future of Work host for One Detroit, Will Glover, and together we'll dive into key discussions on how Detroit can work toward economic equity in the future of work.
We define economic inclusion at Detroit Future City as the ability to fully participate in the economy, no matter what ethnicity you are or where you live geographically. Detroit Future City has made a commitment to increasing the number of middle-class households, specifically middle-class African-American and Latino households, because those are the ones that are falling behind, but they are our largest demographic here in Detroit.
The world's eyes are looking at Detroit because Detroit has always been on the forefront and innovator of new ideas and innovation. I am really excited to be working with Detroit Future City because they know Detroit. They understand racial inequities. They are the think tank for our region around these issues. And so we are working with them and developing focus groups and having conversations with the community about what barriers do you have that we can use our resources to help remove. There are so many barriers, especially for Detroiters who are Black and brown, who are Black and Hispanic. We see the greatest disparities amongst these groups of folks, and it's disheartening.
If we can make advances to increase our overall median income, especially for those households, it will increase the median income and the economic value for the region. Imagine the impact of that. It's critically important that we focus on this. Good morning. Hi, good morning. I'm Anika Goss, and I am so thrilled to see all of you this morning for our 5th annual Equity Forum. So when we think about the future of work, you know, it's mostly just such a buzzword, right? But for us at Detroit Future City, it really means whether or not African Americans and Latino Americans and foreign-born residents that make up the majority of our demographic here in Detroit have the opportunity to prosper and participate in Detroit's economic growth and prosperity. This is an issue that I think we're all really grappling with. There are 2 growing economies here in Detroit. There's one that we all see. There's big skyscrapers going up downtown. There's new job announcements. We talk about tech and new industries. But then we turn to Detroiters and still see that Detroiters are making only half of what white Detroiters are making. And that regardless of education level, we are still not seeing Detroiters achieve the employment rates that we expected them to. These growth occupations, 2 years ago, we did a report with the Brookings Institute on growth occupations. The report is outside, you could get one. And that report really helped us analyze which jobs were growing and who was actually getting those jobs, the fastest growing jobs, the industry. So think about STEM, think about tech, think about fintech. Which jobs were the fastest growing in the region, and then who was getting those jobs? What we learned from that is that it's those growth occupations that account for 2/3 of the region's growth, but only 13% of Black Detroiters were employed in growth occupations in comparison to 29% of white Detroiters. And only 14% of Detroiters have a college degree, but 43% of the growth occupations are held by a person with a 4-year degree. So this has to be something that we all focus on together. We can't do this alone, and we can't look at this as just a social service program. This isn't just a one industry gift you're giving to Detroiters. This is about how we grow our entire economy. Imagine if the 630 odd Detroiters that live here were all fully participating economically, if they were prepared for all of these new jobs. Imagine what that would do for the state, for the region. This is an economic imperative for us to figure out how we can change the trajectory of Detroiters to participate in the future of work. So this is Detroit Future City's new focus. This is how we're really focusing in terms of our strategic plan. How do we actually create opportunity for Black and brown Detroiters? And how do we actually increase, you've heard me say it 1,000 times, increase the number of middle-class households and middle-class neighborhoods in Detroit?
I'm so happy to get the opportunity to be here. I look up to so many people in this room, so it's really an honor to get the chance to stand on the stage today. I'm Hillary Doe. I'm Chief Growth Officer for the state of Michigan and Chief Growth and Marketing Officer for the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. And the task that the governor gave me in June of last year was to think about how we tackle Michigan's population growth, reverse some of our trends, and make sure that we're building a state that can retain our young folks here and be a beacon to others across the country to come and join us. But to be very clear, Michigan's future and our economic future, our economic growth and health is inextricably linked to every Detroiter's economic inclusion and every Detroiter's shared prosperity. There's no way that we do one without the other. There's no opportunity to grow Michigan's economic future without Detroiters. There's no way to grow Michigan's population without building a Detroit where every Detroiter has access to opportunity and every Detroiter has access to a great place that they want to be. There's no population growth strategy without starting with retention. And we don't have a right to retain our young folks without ensuring that they have access to great opportunities and great places where they can build families and futures that we're all proud of. And so that's the plan. The plan is to start by listening. And we've done exactly that. We've, over the last about year and a half, been to every corner of our state. If you want to build the kind of place that folks want to stay in and move to, I believe that you should trust people and listen to them. And so far, we've engaged over 10,000 Michiganders from the Upper Peninsula to the city of Detroit and asked them what they love about their place and what's between them and building their future here. And they've told us that they want great opportunities, that we need to grow our median incomes and we need to provide more access to higher median income jobs for those folks. What good is it for us to have more higher median income jobs unless our folks have opportunity to access those jobs and are prepared for them? So you'll see things like innovation around making sure everybody can access community college. As of right now, every high school student can get that first year of community college for free because we want to make sure Michiganders can access those jobs. And we've got to do better and we've got to do more, but it's born out of the feedback that we've heard from Michiganders. We've also heard from families that they need to be able to access the labor market, that if they want to grow in their own careers, it's a real struggle. We heard from every corner, from the UP to Detroit, being able to have access to childcare is a real challenge that's impeding their own economic opportunity. So we've got to show up and get to work trying to solve that challenge for them. And one step we took was to ensure that every 4-year-old here in the state has access to pre-K. Because we can't just hear what folks need. we've got to get to work if we're going to have a right, again, to retain those young families and attract folks here to our state. And again, we have to ensure that this is step one and acknowledge that it's a group project that will only get done if we do it together. So the other ask that I have of all of you today is that you'll walk on this journey with us. Part of the reason that I was so excited to have the opportunity to be here is to maybe enlist all of you in doing this project together. The only misnomer about being the state's chief growth officer is that there's no such thing as one person helping to, do this on their own. It's absolutely a group project. We have to lock arms together if we're going to get this done together. And so I hope that maybe all of us can, move forward together, keep sharing information together. And I certainly will be reading every report, as I have done, that comes out of Detroit Future City, out of Skillman, and all the other folks that are in the room here to help build the kind of research, background, data, and information that we need, in addition to all that feedback that we're getting from Michiganders across our state, to make sure that we're building a future that our Michiganders want to stay in, have access to opportunity in, and folks across the country will come and join us to be a part of. Does that sound good? Sounds good. All right. I also want to thank personally Detroit Future City for helping us convene some of those groups. You've been incredible partners to the state in this. And again, we're just getting started. I can't wait to be partners with all of you, and come and find me later on. And I can't wait to hear the rest of the day. Thanks, everybody.
First question to each of you, and just take a few minutes here. Introduce yourselves and talk about how your work contributes to advancing economic equity, ensuring that Detroiters have access to quality employment opportunities now and in the future. Start with you, Brian.
Good afternoon, everyone. Brian Smith, also a Wayne State alum. And my second career is in aviation. It's been a love of mine since I was 12 and heard about the Tuskegee Airmen. And I decided that I would dedicate my life to introducing young people to the world of aviation, and not just being a pilot, but you can be an aviation mechanic. They start at $88,000 a year, and this is, after 2 years of education. But there's air traffic control at, 19, 21 years old, you can make $130,000, no college education required. So all of these careers, the inner city of Detroit doesn't know about them. And that's my job, is to expose them to these careers and lead them into those careers so they can successfully matriculate through the training processes and become part of the middle class or upper middle class of America.
Kim?
First of all, please forgive me if my voice is a little hoarse. I spent last evening scream singing songs with Stevie Wonder. So I have a huskier voice than normal. I am the Deputy Director for Prosperity for the Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, which is the longest title on earth. But it is really something that I am very proud of the work that we've been doing in the state. I see a lot of alignment with the priorities that Governor Whitmer has and some of the things that are being talked about on the national stage. Things like the fact that we don't have enough affordable housing in our state, that we have to have a strategy for childcare that will help get more women into the workforce. I see my job as both a Deputy Director of Prosperity and the person who leads the governor's poverty task force as being a person who removes barriers. And so I am here, I'm a former, continuing the theme of Wayne State. I have my own connections to Wayne State University as a double alum and former member of the Wayne State University Board of Governors. And in that role, I saw in real time the barriers that face our children when they were trying to get a college degree. And money is very important. I know that's been talked about a lot, but there are a lot of barriers that money is just one piece of the puzzle. And so I think if there's anything that I've learned in this position, it's that we have to be intentional When we identify barriers, when we identify problems, we have to be intentional about solving problems because it's a network of problems. There's never anything that just happens in a vacuum. And so much of the work that I do with Leo is about really figuring out those connections, figuring out how state government can work collectively in a way that we're moving forward so that we have more prosperity in our state. We are all here, I would imagine, I know my family is here, because we were a state, at one time, that was a state of prosperity. When I grew up, almost everyone I knew was a homeowner. I mean, whether they lived in fact, I lived 1 block away from where we sit right now on the corner of West Outer Drive and Greenview. And that was a neighborhood, and one of my former neighbors on Greenview was right sitting at that table. And we were a community of homeowners. And so those things that made Detroit special, we came here because of prosperity, and we just need to get back to that. And so I'm really glad that this governor and other leaders like Detroit Future City are being intentional about raising solutions in a meaningful way.
I often tease Kim that she's got the most hopeful job title in the world. Director of Prosperity. I want that job. Marvin.
Hi, everyone. Marvin Figueroa. I am the Director of DEI Strategic Partnerships at Kelly Services. For those unfamiliar with Kelly, we are a global workforce solutions provider. Simply put, staffing, you might be familiar with that, is one aspect of our business, but we provide a number of different solutions to our clients globally. I didn't graduate from Wayne State, but my wife did. Does that count? That counts. So in my role, I lead our Equity at Work initiative. And Equity at Work, simply put, is an initiative that we started about 5 years ago that seeks to remove barriers to employment and create equitable access. It's that simple, right? Barriers, we try and broaden the scope, broaden the aperture as much as possible when we think about barriers, but we consult with our clients and try to nudge them into thinking in their end-to-end process. Anything that makes it difficult to access employment is a barrier, right? So some of the things that are common that people are familiar with are things like education, right? So does a particular role actually need a bachelor's degree to be successful in that role, right? What are the other skills? What are the other qualifications, right? Other certifications that can be brought to bear in that role that can help someone be successful? And it's not a knock against education, but it's evaluating the need for education and who are you excluding when you put up that barrier. And sometimes we put up that barrier 15, 20 years ago, and no one has looked at that policy or that process in 15 years, and it's not applicable today. So other things like, for instance, drug panels, THC, right? In states where recreational marijuana use is legal. Why would we be drug screening for THC unless there's a federal requirement or there's truly a safety requirement in terms of the work that's being done, right? And certainly the one that's near and dear to my heart is our Second Chance, Fair Chance hiring program, Kelly 33, right? So the 33 is born out of 33% of adult working population in the US has some sort of justice involvement. So again, when we think about what that means and who we're excluding from fully participating in the workforce and why we're doing that, right? Again, my entire job, my entire mission is to evangelize, socialize, call it what you want, but it's to get corporations to understand that we need to reframe our thinking about what talent looks like, good talent looks like, but also what are we doing in terms of these barriers that's preventing talent from getting in the door.
Scott wants to clap. Scott, you're next.
Good afternoon, everyone. Scott Allen Davis. I am Vice President of Inclusion and Economic Development for SEAL LLC. We are Solutions for Energy Efficient Logistics, and we provide solutions in the energy management service space wherever there are gaps in the energy space. And so what does that mean? We started 15 years ago. Our CEO and chairman and founder, Louis E. James, really was approached by our utilities here because that's when energy efficiency became a thing in our state from a legislative standpoint. And they knew they needed more diversity as it related to their vendors doing this work, going into these communities. And so I love to say we started as a workforce development agency because he knew at that point, if you go back to 2009 in Detroit, when we were in bankruptcy, the big three were falling apart, we were in a recession nationally. He knew that we had a wealth of talent that were losing opportunities in the auto industry. So how do I pull the blue and white collar auto workers and really take their skill sets and expose them and give them access to the green space? And so that's how we started 15 years ago in Detroit. We are a national company, but we are based in Detroit, and we have 4 offices in the state as we work nationally. My responsibility is to really push the agenda in the lily white energy space around justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. We cannot talk about this wave of energy and this opportunity that's once in a generation happening at this moment and not think that it does not need to include Black and brown communities, returning citizens, women. It needs to be inclusive of everybody. And so my job, which is a gift from the heavens, is to challenge people in this industry to make sure that we are inclusive, we are diverse, we are just in the practices, and we are equitable. So I'm very happy to be here.
I want to talk next about the untapped potential of the people who have been locked out, what it means to welcome people into the workforce and get them going after decades, centuries of not having that opportunity. It seems to me that there are 2 things that people primarily need to do that. One is, of course, preparation. The other is connection. And so I want all of you to talk just a little about those 2 things and how in your work you're trying to get people more prepared. How do you make sure people have the connections they need to access the opportunities that you're trying to open up? Marvin, you're up first this time.
So I start with again, from an employer's perspective, I start with us, right? Because and if I misquote this, I apologize. I heard there was a number, I think it was 60,000 or was it 600,000 available jobs in the state of Michigan right now. That's a lot of opportunity. So I start with us. When we think about, again, how we evaluate, how we assess, how we judge talent, when we think about how we get talent from that initial engagement, whether they apply, they found out about it, we reach out to them, all the way through that process, we've been doing the same thing for decades. And it's very one size fits all. And again, I'm not saying that that doesn't have application, but there are other things we need to be doing when we look at talent, right? So there's this trend now, and I call it a trend because, I hear about it, but I don't see a lot of employers applying it. We talk about skills-based, right? As a substitute for things like education, which is a barrier. Let's be honest. Education for a lot of Black and brown individuals is a barrier, but that doesn't mean they don't have the capacity to learn. They just don't learn or have not learned in the same formal way that many others have, right? So again, what can we do to look at that hiring, that talent, that end-to-end talent process in a different way that opens up opportunity for more people? Because I tell you what, again, I go back to this 30-year-old war on talent, and nothing has changed. And if we're going to go into the future and companies are going to be able to compete globally and thrive and innovate and be successful, we can't take the same approaches that we've been taking for 30 years.
Scott, Scott's next.
I want to reference the comment that was made earlier about getting the policy job and not having the Lansing experience. And so when you made that comment at our table, I shared, I've been in energy 11 years now. I had no energy experience, but most sectors and careers are very similar to that. What was noticed was the skill set that I had that could transfer over to something else. I'm also reminded earlier in my career, Anika Goss was at LISC, and they had a program that got people prepared in real estate development. I don't know if if you remember this. And I wasn't a real estate developer. I didn't know anything about that. But my boss at the time, the brilliant Donna Davidson, was like, hey, I think you have the skills to go through this training and you can run our real estate stuff. And it completely changed my career. And so that is what we need to be looking at, and what we need to do is identifying skills, as you said, and really understanding how to take people and nurture and grow them, because that's the only way we're going to be able to do it. What we do at SEAL, really being, a Black-owned energy company in a space where people don't want us to be there, is we have to bring our own people in, because when we bring other people in, they're sabotaging us because they don't want us to be there. So we have to bring our own people in, and we have to train our own people. So we have an amazing training institute. We have a learning management tool. We have trainings that we do that I'm able to do, and other staff, some are in the room today. We're able to go out and train people on this. But the other things that we do in our workforce development work, which has been really solidified at this point, is bringing in partners. Because when we talk about changing the workforce and how it looks, we're going to have other issues. People are going to need other things. We're going to be hiring people who may have never seen people go to work before. So they're not going to come to work the way you think they should come to work. They're not going to do it. I used to say, when they were trying to get me to go to a utility, I would be a bull in a china shop. I'm loud. I don't want to conform. You don't want me there. But a lot of people don't know that about themselves, so they would go there and they would last a short amount of time, feel like they failed, and then they would spiral out. So what do we do to make sure that those things don't happen? One is about training. So we offer training, and we believe in training not just for career seekers, and that's one thing we've changed. It's not job seekers. We're looking for careers. Career seekers, they need training. And the things that we can't provide training for, we work with partners like folks in this room that provide other services that can wrap around and support the other things that they need. The point that I really want to pull out, too, is we also do training for the employers. You cannot say, and we've seen this happening in our face right now, as we talked about in 2020, DEI became a thing. So people made DEI all these initiatives, and DEI has failed. We don't need it anymore. You didn't want it to work. So you set it up so it could fail. So we have trainings available where we're training employers on, this is how you have to operate differently to provide success for people, not failure. People don't know how to think like that. We have to really change people's negative thinking to positive thinking, and it's work on the employer side. But then on the employee side, not just soft skills and the training for the work that they're doing, but if you've never had a job before or seen it, and now you're in a space where you feel like you don't belong, you are having higher levels of anxiety than most typical people in that job are going to have, one. And two, you're going to be feeling some imposter syndrome, like, I don't belong here. And so you're going to start to be defeated in your spirit, and you're not going to be successful. So mental health support, mental health entities are very important in this move, because we want to make sure that people are ready and strong enough within themselves to be successful in this space.
Before we get to Brian, Kim, I think you had a reaction to what Marvin was saying.
Well, I just want to say, of all the brilliant things that Dr. Cobb said, one of the most powerful things I heard today was from Kimberly, actually. And she said, we are not just workers, we're talent. Ooh, that is powerful. Just think about that. We keep talking about reframing. Can we just start there? We are talent. We've always had talent. I'm thinking about in Boston when a person who enslaved Africans, there was some kind of plague, because plagues were really popular then, right? So there was, I can't remember which one it was, but whatever it was, it killed a whole bunch of folks, right? And but there was an enslaved person who tried to introduce the idea of inoculation, which had been happening in Africa forever. And because he was a black slave, people in Boston said, no, we'd rather just die, because we don't believe that you bring that kind of expertise to the table. How many times have we done that throughout the history of our country? People who could have brought solutions to the table get ignored because people make assumptions about them. And so one of the things that we're doing, you asked about how we're applying this to our work. One of the things that I'm doing with my team, we have a pilot that we're going to be launching this year for justice-involved individuals to help to get landlords, because there are people who are coming out we have some great programs in prison so that when people come out, they're trained for good jobs, but they can't get housing because landlords don't want to rent to them. So we're going to incentivize landlords to, take tenants who have some kind of history with justice involvement. And we see it as a case building exercise. So much of what I do is about case building, showing people that the lies and stereotypes and tropes that we have all been taught about people who live in poverty, about Black people, about whomever, can be disproven. And that they are not accurate. And that when we invest in people in a meaningful way, all of society benefits, just like Boston could have benefited from the enslaved person who brought expertise but was discounted. And so we have I think a mandate to make sure that that never happens again. What are we doing in our own personal space to make sure that people who are coming to the table, like I love when you said, you were an engineer, you just needed someone to give you the training but you were a born engineer. So many of us have those kind of talents, but we don't have opportunity and access. So we have to make sure that people are getting those kind of opportunities. And so I'm so proud to be affiliated with Wayne State, because that's in the university's mission to give, it's a university of opportunity.
Yeah. You said you were a double.
Brian, go ahead.
I was triple from Wayne State. The hardest part for the Tuskegee Airmen National Museum is getting young people interested in these careers in aviation. And that requires repeated touching of the children. Not only the children, but when you talk about youth and young adults, if it's before your 31st birthday, I can introduce you to the air traffic control career, and by the time you're 55, you would have to retire with full retirement. It's a very lucrative career that you could just stop what you're doing with 3-4 years of training. You could be, making 6 figures, and we're talking 130 to 150 annually. So breaking down the barrier to they don't know about any of these jobs is the hardest part. The second part is getting them to believe in themselves that they can actually do these careers, because they don't see anybody like them doing these careers. So we have to bring in people, even from afar. They travel into Detroit. We open up the hangar, bring in 200 kids a day, and introduce them to African Americans, brown, and even Caucasian people who are doing these careers. They get to tell about the pros and cons, and that starts to interest the young people. They're interested in money, and that's an attraction, is the money you can make. But we have to also instill in them a love for what they're doing. And that's what I had in both of my careers. I loved engineering, and I love aviation. I don't know if you all have seen the air show during River Days on the Detroit River. That's your Tuskegee Airmen Museum. The only African-American organization in the United States doing air shows today is Tuskegee Airmen National Museum. And we do it with historic aircraft. And these are the kinds of things we want our young people to see. I took 2 young men who were training with us to Oshkosh, the largest air show in the United States. 10,000 airplanes, 1 million people over 7 days, and they were just awed at what was going on. And these are the kinds of things that we raise money for, to break down the barrier so we can take them and show them these careers. Once we do that, we've got to work on the public school system. So I've contacted DPSCD and said, I would like to develop a professional development for teachers and take them through some of the same programs we take the kids through. So we'll take them to Selfridge Air National Guard Base, Detroit Metro Airport. They see the radar tower, they get on an airplane, they see the air marshals, They learn about aviation mechanics. Now, these teachers with that education can talk on a daily basis to their students about these careers. And that'll start producing more young people to roll into this workforce development that we're talking about.
I have one more question, and it is sort of that pie in the sky question, right? If you could get to the space where the outcomes that you think we need are real, are happening, what would those outcomes look like? What are the things that we should be paying attention to? I feel like it's not just numbers. It's not just what's the percentage of people who have access to this or that. That there are more intangibles that we should be paying attention to. What do those look like? Scott, it's your turn to go first.
This would be me first. I think in my head, those tangibles are still just around access and exposure, and not really around numbers, but exposure from birth, exposure, from preschool and kindergarten, just showing young people that there are opportunities, there are things that you can do. I never really realized the importance of exposure until looking at certain documentaries this year. And one that really is a little weird, I guess, in this conversation, but there was a documentary on Netflix about just the history of Black Barbie. And when there were women being interviewed about not seeing representation in that space and how that impacted their lives, that really made me think about the spaces that we're in on a day-to-day basis. What am I not showing my nieces and nephews? What am I not showing the kids in the neighborhood? What am I not showing the young people that are in church? What am I not talking about when we're going and talking with people who are dealing with the justice system? What are we not doing? And what do we need to do to make sure that they see it is a possibility? And, we started hiring returning citizens because we couldn't do it because we work with utilities, and we started to push that. And I started doing it in 2008. I think I was challenged with that concept, and even seeing the exposure that giving people, you can do this, and then you can get the job, and you can be successful at the job, really walking people through that, I think we need to not just expose, but walk people through, handhold, support, love on, be positive about it, focus on our strengths and our talents and all. We don't do that. We don't focus on our assets. So I think those are, a combination of the things that we really need to do.
Yeah. See, you had an answer ready. You were nervous.
This was my scary question, so thank you.
Brian?
So you asked about what would the pie in the sky look like, and to me it would be a continuous loop of young people inspiring young people to get into these careers, and then I, as a seasoned person, could go and do the scuba diving and the skiing and flying that I always wanted to do unrestricted.
Right.
That is a great answer.
How do I follow that? My pie in the sky idea is getting rid of the pie. And when I say that, I mean, we have this pie mentality when it comes to opportunity, that there's only so much that, if I have it, you can't have it because you're taking it away from me. So I think that is something, when we talk about reframing the discussion, that's the first thing we have to do. And that's something I think that Detroit Future City has done really brilliantly, is saying, if we take care of these people who've been locked out, these people who don't have opportunity, it helps all of us. We shouldn't be afraid to help people, to give them the tools that they need, to give them more than you think they deserve, because they've been denied more than they deserve to be denied historically. So let's just get rid of the pie. That's my pie in the sky idea.
Marvin?
That's rough. I had that 1, 2, 3. Okay. My utopic state really is about equitable access. Equitable access benefits everyone. right? But opening up the aperture and creating opportunity for everyone while it benefits everyone, now people who were typically overlooked, locked out, underrepresented, they get to compete. And here's what's going to happen when you open up that aperture and people get to compete. What's going to happen is you're going to get, to your point, this idea of zero-sum game, right? If I do this, it means I have to take from. No, you're going to get a larger pie, and the pie is going to keep growing, right? We're going to be able to innovate, right? We talk about the workforce of the future and jobs of the future and what that looks like, right? Because while we have a good mousetrap now, just think about how much better that mousetrap could be with people bringing in their unique perspectives, right? People bringing in their lived experience, the things that frame and shape who they are, right? And applying that to the problems that we have right now. And I'll say this really quickly to close. We really have three stakeholders in my view, right? It is employers, it is community, but it's also city, state, and federal, right? We all have a role to play in ensuring that when we create equitable access, that it's resourced appropriately. So people not only have access, but now they have the tools that they need and the resources that they need, right, to thrive and live their full lives, right? And I'll tell you this, as employers, we sit in a very unique space because sometimes because of who we are and depending on the industry, we help shape policy sometimes. Not shape it in terms of writing, but influencing. So again, those three stakeholders coming to the table and really just creating equitable access.
Okay, we are out of time officially at this point. I want to thank our panelists, Scott, Marvin, Kim, Brian. Great job.
As today's forum ends, we're left with a clear call to action. From the national perspective of Jelani Cobb to the grassroots efforts of Detroit's leaders, it's evident that economic equity in the future of work is not just an idea, it's a necessity. The conversations we've heard today highlight the importance of innovative solutions, collective action, and intentional investment in our workforce. The work ahead won't be easy, but Detroit has the visionaries and the determination to make equity a reality. Thank you for joining us. Stay engaged as we continue to push forward a more inclusive Detroit. I'm Will Glover, and I'll see you in the future.